In the shadowed kennels of a small Iowa shelter, an aggressive German shepherd named Fang, scarred and snarling, was deemed untouchable, until a brave little girl with a heart of gold unlocked his soul. This is nobody could handle, this aggressive German shepherd. Until a little girl transformed his life, a soul-stirring tale of redemption, love, and the unbreakable bond between a child and a dog that will leave you in tears and inspired. Get cozy, hit that subscribe button, like, share, and drop a comment below to tell us where in the world you're joining us. Because at Pawprints Forever, we're sharing stories that prove even the wildest hearts can find peace. The late summer sun dipped low over Cedar Falls, Iowa, casting long shadows across the county animal shelter's fenced yard. Inside a concrete kennel, a German shepherd named Fang paced restlessly, his black and tan fur matted, his amber eyes flashing with a mix of fear and fury. Scars crisscrossed his flanks, remnants of a life of neglect and betrayal, and his growl was a low, constant warning to anyone who dared approach. Fang had been at the shelter for 6 months, surrendered by a man who'd called him unmanageable, his bared teeth and lunging attacks driving away every potential adopter. Volunteers whispered about his past, rumors of a backyard breeder, a chain, and a cruelty case that never stuck. But Fang's snarl kept the truth locked away. Shelter manager Ellen Brooks watched him through the kennel bars, her heart heavy. "He's got a good soul, I know it," she told her assistant Tara, her voice tinged with frustration. "But no one can get close enough to see it." Tara nodded, her clipboard full of notes on Fang's failed adoptions. 3 families, 2 trainers, all turned away by his aggression. "He bit a volunteer last week," Tara said, her tone grim. "We're running out of time." The shelter's policy loomed. Unadoptable dogs faced a hard deadline, and Fang's was days away. Ellen clutched a worn photo of her own rescue dog, a reminder of second chances, and vowed to find a way. Across town, in a modest house on Maple Street, 7-year-old Sophie Miller sat on her porch, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she colored a picture of a dog with crayons. Her green eyes sparkled with dreams of a pet, a wish she'd whispered since her mother, Laura, lost her job at the factory. Laura, a single mom, watched her daughter with a pang. Sophie's father had left years ago, and their small world was held together by love and little else. "Mommy, when can we get a doggy?" Sophie asked, her voice bright. Laura forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's face. "Soon, sweetheart," she lied, knowing their budget barely covered rent. Laura had heard about the shelter's adoption drive on the radio, a last-ditch effort to place difficult dogs before the deadline. She'd always loved German shepherds, their loyalty a memory from her childhood, but Fang's reputation preceded him. Still, Sophie's plea tugged at her, and on a whim, Laura packed her into their rusty sedan, driving to the shelter with a flicker of hope. Ellen greeted them at the gate, her smile warm but cautious. "We've got some tough cases," she warned, leading them past barking kennels. Sophie clutched her coloring book, her eyes wide, her small hand slipping into Laura's. Fang's kennel was at the end of the row, his growl rumbling like thunder as they approached. Laura hesitated, her grip on Sophie tightening, but Sophie pulled free, pressing her face to the bars. "Hi, doggy," she said, her voice soft, unafraid. Fang froze, his ears twitching, his growl faltering. His amber eyes met Sophie's green ones, and for the first time in months he didn't lunge. Ellen's breath caught, her hand on the gate. "Careful, sweetie," she whispered, but Sophie reached through the bars, her tiny fingers outstretched. Fang sniffed, his body tense, then sat, his tail giving a single hesitant wag. Laura's heart raced, her instinct to pull Sophie back, warring with the sight before her. "He's dangerous," she said, her voice shaky. Ellen nodded, but her eyes were on Fang. "He's never done that," she said, her tone awed. Tara, watching from the office, grabbed a leash, her hands trembling. "Let's try," she said, opening the gate. Fang growled softly as Tara approached, but Sophie stepped closer, her coloring book open to the dog she'd drawn. "See? You're like my picture," she said, holding it up. Fang's growl faded, his head tilting, and he let Tara clip the leash, his eyes still on Sophie. They moved to the yard, Fang's steps cautious, his body low. Sophie sat cross-legged on the grass, her crayons scattered, and patted the ground. "Come, doggy," she said, her voice a melody. Fang hesitated, his scars catching the fading light, but he crept closer, lying beside her, his massive head resting near her knee. Laura's eyes welled, her fear melting into wonder. "How is she doing this?" she whispered. Ellen shook her head, tears brimming. "Some hearts just know each other," she said, her voice thick. Tara knelt nearby, her clipboard forgotten, marveling at the change in Fang. Sophie colored beside him, humming a tune, her small hand brushing his fur. Fang's eyes softened, his body relaxing for the first time since he'd arrived. Ellen watched, her hope rekindled, but the deadline loomed, and Fang's past was a shadow. "He's got a cruelty report tied to his old owner," she told Laura, her voice low. "No charges, but he's been through hell. We need to be sure." Laura nodded, her hand on Sophie's shoulder, her resolve hardening. "We'll take it slow," she said, her voice firm. "But I think he's found his home." The shelter's rhythm held as evening fell, but Cedar Falls buzzed with whispers of Fang's moment. A volunteer snapped a photo of Sophie and Fang, posting it online with #ShelterMiracle, the image spreading fast. Neighbors stopped by, leaving treats at the gate, a child's note taped to the fence. "Fang loves Sophie." Ellen sat in her office, the photo of her own rescue dog beside her heart full but wary. Fang's transformation was a spark, but his past was a storm, and Sophie's love would soon face a test that would ripple through Cedar Falls. The Cedar Falls, Iowa animal shelter buzzed with a cautious hope as the morning sun filtered through the kennel windows. Fang, the German shepherd who'd once snarled at every shadow, sat quietly in his kennel, his black and tan fur less matted, his amber eyes softer but still wary. The scars on his flanks spoke of a brutal past, but his growl had quieted since yesterday's miracle in the yard with Sophie Miller, the 7-year-old girl who'd reached through his fear. His tail gave a tentative wag at the memory, his ears perked for her voice. The shelter's deadline loomed, days away. But Ellen Brooks, the manager, clung to the spark Sophie had ignited. Ellen stood by Fang's kennel, her worn photo of her own rescue dog in her pocket, her voice low. "You've got a chance, boy," she told him, her tone hopeful. Tara, her assistant, checked Fang's file, her brow furrowed. "He didn't snap at me this morning," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "First time in months." The photo of Fang and Sophie, posted online with #ShelterMiracle, had gone viral in Cedar Falls, shared by locals on social media. The image, Sophie coloring beside a calm Fang, drew a crowd to the shelter, neighbors leaving treats and notes. "Fang's a hero." But Ellen knew Fang's past, tied to a cruelty report, could complicate things. At the Miller house on Maple Street, Sophie bounced on the couch, her blonde pigtails swinging as she clutched her coloring book, the page of a dog now labeled Fang in crayon. "When can we bring him home, Mommy?" she asked, her green eyes bright. Laura, her mother, sat beside her, her smile strained but warm. "Soon, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft. Laura's job loss at the factory had left their budget tight, but Sophie's connection with Fang had stirred something in her, a memory of her own childhood dog, a German shepherd who'd been her rock. She'd called Ellen that morning, agreeing to a trial foster, her heart set on giving Sophie this joy. Laura drove them back to the shelter, Sophie humming in the back seat, her coloring book open. Ellen greeted them, her smile wide but cautious. "He's been calmer since yesterday," she said, leading them to the yard. Fang was already there, leashed to a post, his body tense as Tara stood nearby. Sophie ran to him, her small hands outstretched. "Hi, Fang," she called, her voice a melody. Fang's ears perked, his growl fading, and he sat, his amber eyes locked on her. Sophie plopped down, her crayons spilling, and patted the grass. "Draw with me," she said, handing him a pretend crayon. Fang tilted his head, then lay beside her, his massive frame relaxed, his tail wagging. Laura watched, her fear easing, her hand clutching Sophie's backpack. "It's like magic," she whispered. Ellen nodded, her eyes misty. "Some souls just connect," she said, her voice thick. Tara took notes, her clipboard steady, marveling at Fang's change. "He's still cautious with us," she said, "but with her, he's different." Sophie colored a new picture, humming a tune, her tiny hand brushing Fang's fur. He whined softly, his nose nudging her arm, his body at peace for the first time in months. Ellen snapped another photo, the moment a beacon of hope, but the cruelty report nagged at her. Fang's past owner, a man named Derek Holt, had a history, and she feared he'd resurface. Cedar Falls buzzed with Fang's story. The viral photo drew more visitors, families, kids, a local reporter, all captivated by the aggressive shepherd tamed by a child. A diner on Main Street offered Fang fries, and a school started a Sophie and Fang fund for shelter donations. Social media lit up with #ShelterMiracle, the image shared across Iowa. A volunteer, Amy, left a toy bone at Fang's kennel, her note simple, "For Fang from Cedar Falls." Ellen briefed the crowd, her voice warm. "He's got a chance with Sophie," she said, but her eyes flicked to Tara, who'd found Holt's name in the cruelty report. No charges, but a warning loomed. Sophie colored beside Fang, her laughter filling the yard. "You're my best friend," she told him, her voice bright. Fang whined, his head resting on her knee, his scars catching the light. Laura knelt nearby, her hand hovering over his fur, her fear fading. "He's gentle with her," she said, her voice awed. Ellen nodded, but her mind was on Holt. "We'll do a home visit," she told Laura. "Trial foster starts tomorrow, but we need to be sure." Laura agreed, her resolve firm, her hand on Sophie's shoulder. "He's hers," she said, her voice steady. The shelter's rhythm held as noon approached, but Cedar Falls was alight with Fang's tale. Neighbors dropped off blankets, a child's drawing of Fang taped to the gate. "Fang loves Sophie." The reporter interviewed Ellen, her words careful. "He's got a past, but Sophie's his future," she said. Tara shared a new lead. A vet in town recalled treating a German shepherd with scars like Fang's, brought by a man matching Holt's description, who'd paid cash and left no name. "Could be him," Tara said. Ellen's stomach twisted. Holt's shadow was growing and Fang's deadline was a ticking clock. Sophie hugged Fang, her small arms around his neck, her laughter a melody. Fang's eyes softened, his body relaxed, his heart tethered to her. Laura watched, her gratitude boundless, but Ellen's warning lingered. Holt's history was a storm, and Fang's transformation was just beginning. As the shelter quieted, the viral photo spread, a radio station playing calls praising the shelter shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but his past was a wound, and Sophie's love would soon face a challenge that would test the town's heart. The Cedar Falls, Iowa shelter glowed with the soft light of late morning, its kennels quieter as hope flickered through the concrete walls. Fang, the German shepherd once feared for his aggression, lay in a corner of the yard, his black and tan fur brushed clean, his amber eyes calm but watchful. His scars, faint under the sun, told of a brutal past, but his growl had softened since Sophie Miller's touch. The viral photo of him with the 7-year-old, labeled #Shelter Miracle, had bought him time past the deadline, and his trial foster with the Millers was set to begin. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, watched him, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart full but cautious. Ellen knelt by Fang, her voice gentle. "You're getting a home, boy," she said, her tone hopeful. Tara, her assistant, updated Fang's file, her smile rare but genuine. "He let me pet him today," she said, her voice awed. First time without a growl. The photo of Fang and Sophie, shared across Iowa, had drawn a steady stream of visitors, neighbors, kids, a local reporter, all marveling at the aggressive shepherd tamed by a child. A diner on Main Street offered Fang burgers, and a school launched a Sophie and Fang fund for shelter costs. Social media buzzed with #Shelter Miracle, but Ellen's mind lingered on Derek Holt, Fang's past owner, whose cruelty report loomed like a storm. At the Miller house on Maple Street, Sophie danced around the living room, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she packed a dog bed she'd made from an old blanket, labeled Fang's Spot in crayon. "He's coming today, Mommy," she cheered, her green eyes sparkling. Laura, her mother, smiled, her hands busy folding laundry, her heart lighter despite their tight budget. The trial foster was a leap. Laura's factory job loss still stung, but Sophie's joy with Fang had rekindled her hope. She'd called Ellen to confirm, her voice firm. "We'll make it work," she said, recalling her childhood German shepherd, a companion she'd lost too soon. Laura drove them to the shelter, Sophie clutching her coloring book, her excitement palpable. Ellen greeted them, her smile wide but wary. "He's ready," she said, leading them to the yard. Fang waited, leashed, his body tense until Sophie ran to him. "Fang," she called, her voice a melody. His ears perked, his growl absent, and he sat, his amber eyes locked on her. Sophie hugged him, her small arms around his neck, and he whined, his tail wagging. Laura watched, her fear fading, her hand on Sophie's shoulder. "He's gentle," she whispered. Ellen nodded, her eyes misty. "She's his piece," she said, her voice thick. They signed the foster papers, Tara noting Fang's calm demeanor, a stark contrast to his past. "He's never been this steady," she said, clipping on a new collar with a tag reading, "Fang, Miller Family." Sophie led him to the car, her crayons spilling as she chattered. Fang followed, his steps cautious but trusting, his massive frame relaxed beside her. Laura drove home, her heart full, but Ellen's warning echoed. Holt's cruelty report was a shadow, and a home visit was planned. "We'll check in tomorrow," Ellen said, her tone firm. Laura nodded, her resolve hardening. "He's ours," she said, her voice steady. At the Miller house, Sophie showed Fang his bed, her laughter filling the room as he sniffed it, then lay down. "Stay, Fang," she said, patting his head. He obeyed, his eyes soft, his body at ease. Laura set out water and a bowl of food, marveling at his transformation. "How did she do this?" she asked, her voice awed. Ellen, who'd followed for the visit, smiled. "Some hearts just know," she said, her voice thick. Tara took notes, her clipboard steady, but her eyes flicked to Fang's scars, marks of a past Ellen feared Holt might claim. Cedar Falls buzzed with Fang's story. Neighbors dropped off toys, a child's drawing of Fang with Sophie taped to the door. "Best friends," the reporter interviewed Laura, her words careful. "He's a new dog with her," she said. The Sophie and Fang Fund grew, with donations from Des Moines funding shelter upgrades. A volunteer, Amy, left a bone toy, her note simple, "For Fang's new life." But Ellen's concern deepened. Tara had found a vet record of a German shepherd treated for chain wounds, linked to Holt's address, abandoned a year ago. "Could be him," Tara said. Ellen's stomach twisted. Holt's shadow was growing, and Fang's new life hung in the balance. Sophie colored beside Fang, her humming a tune, her hand brushing his fur. "You're my doggie," she told him, her voice bright. Fang whined, his head on her lap, his scars catching the light. Laura watched, her gratitude boundless, but Ellen's warning lingered. Holt's history was a storm. As evening fell, the house quieted, the fund donations pouring in, a radio station playing calls praising the shelter shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but his past with Holt was a wound, and Sophie's love would soon face a challenge that would test the town's resolve. The Cedar Falls, Iowa. Afternoon sun warmed the Miller house on Maple Street, its living room alive with the soft rustle of crayons and the gentle thud of a German shepherd's tail. Fang, once the shelter's terror, lay sprawled on a dog bed labeled Fang's Spot, his black and tanned fur gleaming, his amber eyes calm as they followed 7-year-old Sophie Miller. His scars, faded but visible, told of a harsh past, but his growl had vanished since his trial foster began. The viral photo of him with Sophie, tagged #ShelterMiracle, had given him a reprieve, and his bond with her grew stronger each day. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, watched from the couch, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart hopeful but wary. Ellen sipped coffee, her voice warm. "He's a different dog with her," she said, nodding at Fang. Sophie, her blonde pigtails swaying, colored a picture of Fang with a crown, her green eyes bright. "He's my prince," she giggled, patting his head. Fang whined softly, his nose nudging her hand, his tail thumping. Laura, Sophie's mother, smiled, her hands folding laundry, her tension easing. "She's changed him," she said, her voice awed. The trial foster, a leap despite their tight budget, had brought a lightness to their home, but Ellen's concern lingered. Derek Holt, Fang's past owner, was a shadow tied to a cruelty report. Tara, Ellen's assistant, arrived for the home visit, her clipboard in hand, her smile rare but genuine. "He's let me near him twice now," she said, petting Fang's scruff. Fang's body relaxed, a stark contrast to his shelter days, but his flinch at sudden noises hinted at his past. Ellen checked his collar, the Fang Miller family tag, glinting, and nodded. "He's adapting," she said, her tone careful. The Sophie and Fang Fund had grown, with donations from across Iowa funding shelter upgrades, and a diner on Main Street offered Fang Shakes. Social media buzzed with #ShelterMiracle, but Ellen's mind was on Holt. A vet record linked him to a scarred German shepherd, abandoned a year ago. Sophie led Fang to the backyard, her laughter filling the air as she tossed a ball. "Fetch, Fang," she called, her voice a melody. Fang bounded after it, his steps steady, his scars catching the light. Laura watched from the porch, her fear fading, her hand on Ellen's arm. "He's gentle with her," she said, her voice thick. Ellen nodded, her eyes misty. "Some souls just connect," she said, but her voice wavered. Holt's cruelty report was a storm brewing. Tara took notes, her clipboard steady, but her eyes flicked to Fang's scars, marks of a past she feared might return. Cedar Falls buzzed with Fang's story. Neighbors dropped off toys, a child's drawing of Fang with Sophie taped to the door. "Best pals," the reporter revisited, her words warm. "He's a new dog with her," she said, filming Sophie and Fang playing. The fund grew with donations from Des Moines, and a school planned an Adopt a Shelter Pet Day inspired by them. A volunteer, Amy, left a chew toy, her note simple, for Fang's new family. But Ellen's concern deepened. Tara had found a neighbor's account of Holt yelling at a chained dog, the description matching Fang. Could be him, Tara said. Ellen's stomach twisted. Holt's shadow was closer, and the trial Foster's success hung in the balance. Sophie hugged Fang, her small arms around his neck, her laughter a melody. "You're staying forever," she told him, her voice bright. Fang whined, his head on her shoulder, his body at ease. Laura knelt beside them, her hand brushing his fur, her gratitude boundless. "He's ours," she said, her voice firm. Ellen smiled, but her mind raced. Holt's name in the vet record, the neighbor's story, a cruelty warning with no charges. "We need to talk to him," she told Tara, her tone grim. "If he's Fang's owner, we'll fight it." Tara nodded, her resolve hardening, but the past was a wound. The house quieted as evening fell, the fund donations pouring in, a radio station playing calls, praising the shelter shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but Holt's shadow loomed. Sophie colored beside him, her humming a tune, her hand on his fur. Laura watched, her love for Fang growing, but Ellen's warning lingered. Holt's history could unravel their new life. As the sun dipped, the community's support swelled, but a knock at the door brought a chill. Holt's presence was near, and Sophie's love would soon face a test that would shake Cedar Falls. The Cedar Falls, Iowa evening cast a golden hue over the Miller house on Maple Street, its living room alive with the gentle snores of a German shepherd, and the soft scratch of crayons. Fang, once the shelter's untamed terror, slept on his bed labeled Fang's Spot, his black and tan fur gleaming, his amber eyes closed in rare peace. His scars, faint under the lamplight, whispered of a brutal past, but his growl had faded since Sophie Miller's love took root. The trial Foster, now a week strong, had transformed him, and the viral photo with #ShelterMiracle had rallied the town. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, sat with Laura, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart full but tense. Ellen sipped tea, her voice low. "He's thriving here," she said, watching Fang. Sophie, her blonde pigtails messy from play, colored a picture of Fang with a halo, her green eyes bright. "He's my angel," she whispered, patting his head. Fang's tail thumped, his nose nudging her hand, his body relaxed. Laura smiled, her hands folding a blanket, her worry easing. "She's his world," she said, her voice thick. The trial Foster had lifted their spirits despite the tight budget, but Ellen's concern grew. Derek Holt, Fang's past owner, had been spotted near town, his cruelty, report a shadow. A knock at the door sharpened her gaze. Tara, Ellen's assistant, entered, her face grim, her clipboard trembling. "Holt's here," she said, her voice low. "Saw him at the diner, asking about a German shepherd." Fang's ears perked, his body tensing, a low growl rumbling as the knock repeated. Laura's heart raced, her hand on Sophie's shoulder, but Sophie stood, her voice steady. "It's okay, Fang," she said, opening the door. A man loomed, tall, rough, with a scarred face, Derek Holt, his eyes narrowing at Fang. "That's my dog, Rex," he said, his tone harsh. Fang's growl deepened, his hackles rising, but he stayed by Sophie, his amber eyes fierce. Ellen stepped forward, her voice firm. "He's under foster care with the Millers," she said, blocking Holt. "You surrendered him." Holt sneered, pulling a faded photo from his pocket. Fang, younger, chained, his eyes dull. "That's Rex," he said. "I lost him. Want him back." Tara took notes, her hands steady, but her eyes flicked to Fang's scars, marks matching the vet record. Laura clutched Sophie, her fear returning. "He's different now," she said, her voice shaking. Sophie hugged Fang, her small arms tight. "He's my doggy," she whispered, her voice a lifeline. Fang whined, his growl fading, his trust in her unshaken. Cedar Falls buzzed with the news. The viral photo had drawn a crowd, neighbors, kids, the reporter, all gathered outside, their voices a mix of support and concern. A diner offered Fang Defenders meals, and the Sophie and Fang Fund swelled with donations from Waterloo. Social media lit up with #ShelterMiracle, but #SaveFang trended as Holt's claims spread. A volunteer, Amy, left a note, "Protect Fang." Ellen briefed the crowd, her voice warm. "He's thriving with Sophie," she said, but her eyes met Tara's. Holt's presence was a threat. The vet record, the neighbor's story, a cruelty warning, evidence was mounting. Holt argued, his voice rising. "He's my property, trained him myself," he said, stepping closer. Fang lunged, stopped only by Sophie's hand on his collar, her voice calm. "No, Fang, stay." He obeyed, his growl softening, his eyes on her. Ellen's heart swelled, but her mind raced. Holt's photo was weak, his claim shaky. "We need a hearing," she told him, her tone firm. "Shelter records show abandonment." Holt scowled, leaving with a threat. "I'll get him back." Laura's hands trembled, but Sophie hugged Fang tighter. "You're mine," she said, her voice bright. Fang whined, his head on her lap, his scars a map of his past. The house quieted as night fell, the crowd dispersing, their support a shield. The fund grew, with donations from Des Moines, a radio station playing calls praising the Shelter Shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but Holt's claim was a wound. Laura called Ellen, her voice steady. "We'll fight for him," she said. Ellen agreed, her resolve hardening. Holt's history was a storm, and Sophie's love was Fang's anchor. As the town rallied, a vet confirmed the record. Fang's wounds matched Holt's neglect, but the hearing loomed, and Cedar Falls's heart would soon face a battle. The Cedar Falls, Iowa night wrapped the Miller house on Maple Street in a quiet glow, the living room lit by a single lamp as Sophie Miller slept on the couch, her blonde pigtails splayed across as a pillow. Fang, the German shepherd who'd once terrorized the shelter, lay beside her, his black and tan fur gleaming, his amber eyes soft as he guarded her dreams. His scars, faint under the light, spoke of a brutal past, but his growl had silenced since Sophie's love claimed him. The trial foster, now 2 weeks strong, had rooted him here, and the viral #ShelterMiracle photo had rallied the town. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, sat with Laura, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart tense but hopeful. Ellen whispered, her voice low. "He's her protector now," she said, watching Fang. Sophie stirred, her green eyes fluttering open, a smile breaking as she hugged Fang. "My doggy," she murmured, patting his head. Fang whined, his nose nudging her, his tail thumping softly. Laura, her mother, smiled, her hands clutching a cup of tea, her worry lingering. "She's changed him," she said, her voice thick. The foster had lifted their spirits, despite financial strain, but Derek Holt's claim loomed. His visit had stirred fear, and his cruelty report was a shadow. A vet's confirmation of Fang's wounds tied to Holt's neglect fueled the tension. Tara, Ellen's assistant, arrived, her face grim, her clipboard heavy with notes. "Holt's filed for custody," she said, her voice low. "Hearing set for Friday, says Fang, Rex, is his property." Fang's ears perked, his body tensing, a low growl rumbling as Tara spoke Holt's name. Sophie sat up, her hand on Fang's collar. "No, Fang, stay," she said, her voice calm. He obeyed, his growl fading, his eyes on her. Laura's heart raced, her hand on Sophie's shoulder. "He can't take him," she said, her voice shaking. Ellen nodded, her jaw tight. "We've got evidence. Shelter records, vet testimony, Holt's cruelty warning." Cedar Falls buzzed with the news. The viral photo had drawn a crowd, neighbors, kids, the reporter, all gathered outside, their voices a mix of support and anger. A diner offered Fang's Fight specials, and the Sophie and Fang Fund soared, with donations from Iowa City. Social media lit up with #SaveFang, the hashtag trending as Holt's claim spread. A volunteer, Amy, left a sign. "Fang stays." Ellen briefed the crowd, her voice steady. "He's thriving with Sophie," she said, but her eyes met Tara's. Holtz's lawyer was pushing hard. The vet's record, the neighbor's story, a photo of Fang chained. Evidence was stacking, but the hearing was a battle. Holt's lawyer, a slick man from Des Moines, called Ellen, his tone sharp. "Rex was stolen," he said. "Holt wants him back." Ellen countered, her voice firm. "He was abandoned, abused. Records prove it." The lawyer scoffed, promising a fight. Tara dug deeper, finding a witness, a junkyard worker who'd seen Holt beat a German shepherd, the dog fleeing into the night. "Matches Fang's scars," she said. Ellen's stomach twisted. Holt's past was a storm, and Sophie's love was Fang's shield. Laura called a local lawyer, her voice steady. "We'll defend him," she said, her resolve hardening. Sophie played with Fang, her laughter filling the room as she tossed a ball. "You're mine forever," she told him, her voice bright. Fang balked, catching it, his tail a blur. Laura watched, her gratitude boundless, but Ellen's warning lingered. Holt's claim could unravel their peace. The house quieted as midnight neared, the crowd dispersing, their support a fortress. The fund grew, with donations from Omaha, a radio station playing calls praising the shelter shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but Holt's hearing was a wound. Sophie hugged Fang, whispering, "Stay with me," and he whined, his heart tethered to her. As dawn approached, the town stirred, the TV crew from Des Moines arriving. Ellen met with the lawyer, her evidence ready. Shelter logs, vet reports, witness statements. Tara shared a new lead. A neighbor recalled Holt selling a dog like Fang, the buyer backing out after seeing the scars. "Abandonment, not theft," she said. Ellen's resolve strengthened. Holt's claim was weak, but his temper was a threat. Laura sat with Sophie, her love for Fang growing, but the hearing loomed, and Cedar Falls's heart would soon face a reckoning that would test their bond. The Cedar Falls, Iowa courthouse buzzed with anticipation under a gray Thursday sky, its steps crowded with neighbors waving Pawprints signs, their voices a chorus of support. Inside, Sophie Miller sat beside her mother, Laura, her blonde pigtails neat, her green eyes wide as she clutched a crayon drawing of a German shepherd with a heart. The custody hearing for Fang, the once aggressive shelter dog, had arrived, his trial foster now a battleground. Fang waited at home, his black and tan fur gleaming, his amber eyes calm since Sophie's love tamed him. His scars, faint under the light, spoke of a brutal past tied to Derek Holt, whose claim threatened their bond. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, sat ready, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart a mix of hope and dread. Ellen leaned toward Laura, her voice low. "We've got a strong case," she said, patting a folder of evidence. Sophie hugged her drawing, whispering, "Fang's my best friend." Laura smiled, her hands trembling, her love for Fang unshaken despite their tight budget. "He's staying," she said, her voice firm. The courtroom filled. Firefighters, nurses, the reporter, all drawn by #Shelter Miracle, the viral photo that had rallied Cedar Falls. Tara, Ellen's assistant, arranged documents, her clipboard steady, her eyes on Holt as he entered, his scarred face set, his lawyer beside him. The Sophie and Fang Fund had grown, funding shelter upgrades, but Holt's claim loomed like a storm. Holt took the stand, his voice rough. "That's my dog, Rex," he said, holding up a faded photo of Fang chained, his eyes dull. "He ran off and they stole him." The crowd murmured, their anger rising. Ellen countered, her voice steady. "Shelter records show abandonment, not theft," she said, presenting logs of Fang's surrender 6 months ago. Tara added the vet's report, confirming Fang's chain wounds matched Holt's address, her tone firm. He was neglected, abused. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, listened, her gaze sharp. Holt's lawyer argued, ownership isn't erased by time, but his case wavered. Sophie's testimony was a beacon. She stood, her small voice clear. "Fang saved me," she said, holding up her drawing. "He's not mean. He's my friend." Tears welled as she described their bond, Fang's growl fading with her touch. Laura squeezed her hand, her eyes misty. "She's his heart," she whispered. Ellen presented witness statements, a junkyard worker recalling Holt beating a German shepherd, a neighbor seeing Fang flee a chain. The vet testified, his voice firm. "Those scars are from prolonged neglect linked to Holt." The crowd nodded, their support a wave, but Holt's lawyer pressed, his tone sharp. "He's my trained guard dog." Cedar Falls buzzed outside, the viral photo fueling #SaveFang, trending statewide. A diner offered Fang's Justice pies, and school kids waved signs. "Keep Fang." The Sophie and Fang Fund soared, with donations from Ames, a TV crew from Des Moines filming the crowd. A volunteer, Amy, left a banner, "Fang's family." Ellen briefed them, her voice warm. "He's thriving with Sophie," she said, but her eyes met Tara's. Holt's temper was a threat. The neighbor's story, the vet's evidence, a photo of Fang's scars. Proof was strong, but the judge's ruling hung in the air. Holt's lawyer called a witness, a shaky man claiming to have seen Fang with Holt, but his account faltered under questioning. "It was years ago," he mumbled. Ellen's heart lifted, Holt's case weakened. Laura held Sophie, her resolve hardening. "He's ours," she said, her voice steady. The judge reviewed evidence, her silence heavy. Holt glared, his fists clenched, but Sophie's drawing lay on the table, a symbol of their bond. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls's heartbeat, but the hearing was a wound. The crowd waited, their love a shield, as the judge prepared to speak. As noon neared, the courtroom tensed, the TV crew zooming in. The Sophie and Fang Fund grew, with donations from Waterloo, a radio station playing calls, praising the shelter shepherd. Ellen's evidence stacked, shelter logs, vet reports, witness tales, but Holt's presence was a shadow. Sophie whispered to Laura, "Fang's coming home," her faith unshaken. The judge's gavel tapped, her voice cutting through. Pending a final review, custody leans toward the Millers. Evidence of abandonment and neglect is compelling. Cheers erupted, but Holt stormed out, his threat lingering. "This ain't over." Cedar Falls' heart swelled, but the battle for Fang was far from done. The Cedar Falls, Iowa evening settled over the Miller house on Maple Street, its living room aglow with the flicker of a fireplace, casting warm light on a German shepherd curled beside a little girl. Fang, once the shelter's untamed menace, lay on his bed labeled Fang's Spot, his black and tan fur glossy, his amber eyes soft as he watched Sophie Miller sleep. His scars, faint under the firelight, spoke of a brutal past tied to Derek Holt, but his growl had vanished since Sophie's love claimed him. The custody hearing's partial ruling in their favor had granted a reprieve, but Holt's threat lingered. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, sat with Laura, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart a mix of relief and tension. Ellen whispered, her voice low. "He's safe for now," she said, patting Fang's head. Sophie stirred, her blonde pigtails splayed, her green eyes opening to hug Fang. "My doggy," she murmured, her voice sleepy. Fang whined, his nose nudging her, his tail thumping softly. Laura smiled, her hands clutching a mug, her worry easing but not gone. "She's his anchor," she said, her voice thick. The trial foster, now 3 weeks strong, had woven Fang into their lives, despite their tight budget, but Holt's appeal loomed. His lawyer was pushing for a full hearing, and his cruelty report was a shadow. A knock at the door sharpened their focus. Tara, Ellen's assistant, entered, her face grim, her clipboard trembling. "Holt's appealed," she said, her voice low. "Full hearing next week, and he's got a new witness." Fang's ears perked, his body tensing, a low growl rumbling as Tara spoke Holt's name. Sophie sat up, her hand on Fang's collar. "It's okay, Fang," she said, her voice calm. He obeyed, his growl fading, his eyes on her. Laura's heart raced, her hand on Sophie's shoulder. "He can't take him," she said, her voice shaking. Ellen nodded, her jaw tight. "We'll fight. Shelter records, vet testimony, everything." Cedar Falls buzzed with the news. The viral hash shelter miracle photo had drawn a crowd. Neighbors, kids, the reporter, all gathered outside, their voices a mix of support and defiance. A diner offered Fang stand sandwiches, and the Sophie and Fang Fund soared with donations from Dubuque. Social media lit up with #SaveFang, the hashtag trending as Holt's appeal spread. A volunteer, Amy, left a sign. "Fang's home." Ellen briefed the crowd, her voice steady. "He's thriving with Sophie," she said, but her eyes met Tara's. Holt's new witness was a wild card. The vet's record, the neighbor's story, a photo of Fang's scars. Evidence was strong, but the fight was far from over. Holt's lawyer called, his tone sharp. "New witness saw Rex with Holt recently," he said. "Strengthens our claim." Ellen countered, her voice firm. "Fang was abandoned, records prove it." Tara dug deeper, finding the witness, a drifter who'd worked for Holt, his story vague but paid. "He's lying," she said. A neighbor confirmed Holt chaining a dog like Fang, the scars matching, and a second vet recalled treating him, abandoned and starved. Ellen's stomach twisted. Holt's past was a storm, and Sophie's love was Fang's shield. Laura called their lawyer, her voice steady. "We'll prove he's ours," she said, her resolve hardening. Sophie played with Fang, her laughter filling the room as she tossed a toy. "You're my best friend," she told him, her voice bright. Fang barked, catching it, his tail a blur. Laura watched, her gratitude boundless, but Ellen's warning lingered. Holt's appeal could unravel their peace. The house quieted as midnight neared, the crowd dispersing, their support a fortress. The fund grew with donations from Sioux City, a radio station playing calls praising the shelter shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl. His story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but Holt's witness was a wound. Sophie hugged Fang, whispering, "Stay with me," and he whined, his heart tethered to her. As dawn approached, the town stirred, the TV crew from Des Moines returning. Ellen met with the lawyer, her evidence ready. Shelter logs, vet reports, witness tales. Tara shared a new lead. The drifter's story unraveled under pressure, admitting Holt paid him. "Weakens their case," she said. Ellen's resolve strengthened. Holt's claim was frail, but his temper was a threat. Laura sat with Sophie, her love for Fang growing, but the hearing loomed, and Cedar Falls's heart would soon face a reckoning that would test their bond to the limit. The Cedar Falls, Iowa courthouse glowed under a crisp Friday morning sky, its steps thronged with townsfolk waving pawprint banners, their voices a unified roar of hope. Inside, Sophie Miller sat beside her mother, Laura, her blonde pigtails tied with ribbons, her green eyes steady as she held a crayon drawing of a German shepherd with a star. The full custody hearing for Fang, the once aggressive shelter dog, had arrived, his trial foster now a battle for his future. Fang waited at home, his black and tan fur shining, his amber eyes calm since Sophie's love tamed him. His scars, faint under the light, spoke of a brutal past tied to Derek Holt, whose appeal threatened their bond. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, sat ready, her worn photo of her rescue dog in her pocket, her heart a blend of resolve and anxiety. Ellen leaned toward Laura, her voice low. "We've got everything," she said, tapping a thick folder of evidence. Sophie clutched her drawing, whispering, "Fang's my hero." Laura nodded, her hands steady, her love for Fang unwavering despite their strained budget. "He's staying," she said, her voice firm. The courtroom swelled, firefighters, nurses, the reporter, all drawn by #shelter miracle, the viral photo that had united Cedar Falls. Tara, Ellen's assistant, organized documents, her clipboard firm, her eyes on Holt as he entered, his scarred face grim, his lawyer beside him. The Sophie and Fang Fund had soared, funding a new shelter wing, but Holt's persistence cast a shadow. Holt took the stand, his voice rough. "That's my dog, Rex," he said, slamming down a faded photo of Fang chained, his eyes hollow. "They stole him, and I want him back." The crowd hissed, their anger palpable. Ellen rose, her voice steady. "Shelter records show abandonment 6 months ago," she said, presenting logs and a vet report linking Fang's scars to Holt's neglect. Tara added witness statements, a junkyard worker recalling Holt's beatings, a neighbor seeing Fang flee a chain. The judge, a stern woman with piercing eyes, listened, her pen poised. Holt's lawyer argued, "Ownership stands unless proven lost," but his case wavered. Sophie's testimony was a light. She stood, her small voice clear. "Fang loves me," she said, holding up her drawing. "He's not mean, he's my friend." Tears glistened as she described their bond, Fang's growl fading with her touch. Laura squeezed her hand, her eyes wet. "She's his soul," she whispered. Ellen presented new evidence. A second vet's affidavit confirming Fang's starvation under Holt and the drifter's recanted story, admitting Holt's bribe. The crowd nodded, their support a wave, but Holt's lawyer called a final witness, a shaky man claiming to have sold Fang to Holt, his tale muddled by time. Cedar Falls pulsed outside, the viral photo fueling #SaveFang, trending nationwide. A diner offered Fang's victory cakes, and school kids waved signs. "Fang stays." The Sophie and Fang Fund exploded, with donations from Minneapolis, a TV crew from Omaha filming the crowd. A volunteer, Amy, left a banner, "Fang's family forever." Ellen briefed them, her voice warm. "He's Sophie's heart," she said, but her eyes met Tara's. Holt's temper was a threat. The neighbor's story, the vet's reports, a photo of Fang's scars. Proof was overwhelming, but the judge's ruling hung in the air. Holt's witness faltered under cross-examination, admitting he'd never seen Fang recently, his story collapsing. Ellen's heart lifted. Holt's case crumbled. Laura held Sophie, her resolve iron. "He's ours," she said, her voice steady. The judge reviewed evidence, her silence heavy. Holt glared, his fists clenched, but Sophie's drawing lay on the table, a symbol of their bond. The crowd waited, their love a fortress, as the judge spoke. Evidence of abandonment and neglect is conclusive. Custody is granted to the Millers with Cedar Falls' support. Cheers erupted, tears flowed, but Holt stormed out, his threat lingering. "I'll get even." The house buzzed with joy that night, Fang leaping to greet Sophie, his tail a blur. "You're home," she cried, hugging him. Fang whined, his nose buried in her neck, his scars a faded memory. Laura watched, her gratitude boundless, but Ellen's warning remained. Holt's temper was unpredictable. The Sophie and Fang Fund launched the Fang Shelter, saving strays, with Ellen at its helm. Social media exploded, #SaveFang celebrating, a radio station playing calls praising the shelter shepherd. Fang's scars, his growl, his story was Cedar Falls' heartbeat, but Holt's shadow lingered, and the town's love would soon face a final test. The Cedar Falls, Iowa spring sun bathed the Miller house on Maple Street in a golden glow, its backyard alive with the laughter of a little girl and the joyful bark of a German shepherd. Fang, once the shelter's untamed terror, bounded across the grass, his black and tan fur thick and glossy, his amber eyes bright as he chased a ball tossed by 7-year-old Sophie Miller. His scars, faded to faint lines, spoke of a brutal past under Derek Holt, but his growl had long vanished since Sophie's love claimed him. The custody battle's victory 2 months ago had sealed his place with the Millers, and the town's celebration was in full swing. Ellen Brooks, the shelter manager, watched from the porch, her worn photo of her rescued dog in her pocket, her heart full of pride. Ellen smiled, her voice warm. "He's your shadow now," she said, patting Sophie's head. Sophie, her blonde pigtails bouncing, hugged Fang as he dropped the ball. "My best friend," she cheered, her green eyes sparkling. Fang whined, his nose nudging her, his tail a constant wag. Laura, Sophie's mother, joined them, her hands carrying a tray of lemonade, her smile radiant. "She's his world," she said, her voice thick. The trial foster had become permanent, lifting their spirits despite past financial strain, and the Sophie and Fang Fund had transformed the shelter into the Fang Shelter, saving countless dogs. But Holt's final threat lingered in their minds. The Fang Day festival, held in Cedar Falls Park, was a testament to their journey. Fang rode a float draped in green and gold, a Hero Shepherd medal glinting on his collar. Sophie walked beside him, waving to kids tossing flower petals, their paw-print banners fluttering. Ellen, Tara, and Laura joined, their pride evident while the reporter filmed the crowd. The mayor unveiled a plaque, "Fang, Cedar Falls Guardian." The Fang Shelter thrived, with Ellen leading adoptions and social media buzzed with #SaveFang, the story shared globally. A diner offered Fang's Feast specials, and school kids sang a song about the shelter shepherd. At home, Sophie sat with Fang, her crayons scattered as she drew him with wings. "You're an angel," she said, her voice bright. Fang lay beside her, his head on her lap, his scars a faint memory. Laura hung a new frame, Sophie's custody hearing drawing, beside the fireplace, her gratitude boundless. "You saved us too," she whispered, scratching his ears. Neighbors dropped off treats, and the landlord built a dog run, painted with paw prints. The Fang Shelter's first graduation saw 10 dogs adopted, Laura and Sophie mentoring families, their bond with Fang unbreakable. Holt's shadow had faded, his appeal denied, but a letter arrived that morning, stirring unease. The letter from Holt was a scrawl. "Rex is mine. I'll be back." Laura's hands trembled, but Ellen's call calmed her. "He's got no case," she said, citing the judge's ruling and Holt's lost appeal. Tara had found a restraining order filed by a neighbor against Holt, his temper documented, and the police were monitoring him. "He's done," Tara said, her voice firm. Sophie hugged Fang, her faith unshaken. "He can't hurt you," she said, her voice a melody. Fang whined, his eyes on her, his past a closed chapter. The town's love had built a fortress, and Holt's threat was a ghost. Cedar Falls never forgot its guardian. Schools taught Fang's story, the plaque a landmark, and the Fang shelter became a beacon, saving strays from coast to coast. Sophie grew, her sketches sold to fund adoptions, and Laura found steady work, their home a haven. Fang's journey, from chained aggression to a girl's gentle hand, proved love's power. Some heroes are forged in pain, transformed by a child's heart, showing the broken can heal a town with one act of faith. Fang, the German shepherd who couldn't be handled, didn't just find a home with Sophie. He united Cedar Falls, proving the fiercest souls can become the gentlest guardians. If this story warmed your heart, hit like, share, and subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more tales of loyalty and transformation. Drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? Let's celebrate our furry heroes together, because sometimes the ones who growl loudest teach us the sweetest lessons. If this story warmed your heart, hit like, share, and subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more tales of loyalty and transformation. Drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? Let's celebrate our furry heroes together, because sometimes the ones who growl loudest teach us the sweetest lessons.